Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. I'm Amy Barnes. I'm a senior advisor to the California-China Climate Institute, and I am so delighted to be here with you all today. China and California have emissions trading systems that are two of the world's largest, and both stand as examples for other international carbon markets and have worked in the past collaboratively as well. So today's conversation will cover carbon market design, implementation, and regulation for California and China's systems. Just a little bit of housekeeping. The discussion will last approximately an hour and a half, and it is being recorded. If you would like to direct questions to our speakers, please use the Q&A function on your screen at any time during the webinar. And we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can live. And if you need help finding it, it is in the bottom of your Zoom screen. For me, it's under the More ellipses 3-dot button. And then if you pull that up, there is a Q&A option. So with that, I would like to go ahead and introduce our first esteemed panelist, who we're so delighted to have with us. Zhang Jilang is a professor and director at the Institute of Energy, Environment, and Economy at Tsinghua University. He has served as the lead author of the 4th and 5th IPCC climate change assessment reports, and as the Secretary General of the New Energy Committee of China Energy Research Society, and the Vice Chair of the China Renewable Energy Industry Association. Professor Zhang has been leading a national carbon market research project, which aims to support the design of China's national emissions trading scheme. And Dr. Zhang will be providing an update on the Chinese national emissions trading system. Let me just say how fortunate we are to have him here today, particularly in light of the news coming out of China of progress on that program. So I know I am personally very excited and honored at the opportunity to hear this update directly on the heels of such exciting news. So we'll begin with you, Professor. I will turn it over to you for an update on China's national carbon market development. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Aimee. So I would like to now share the screen. Okay. So hello, everyone, and good morning and good evening. So it's really a great pleasure to be here to join this very interesting. So now it works.
Yes, we can see your slides.
You can see my slides. Okay. I think maybe I need to, but it doesn't. I will try. Okay. It doesn't work. I'm sorry. So it looks. I can't handle it here.
Let's see if we can get some technical support here to make sure they're up. I did see them go up. So they were visible, I think, to all the participants just a moment ago. Great.
So the problem is I can't move. So I can't move the PPT slides. So it's a problem. It doesn't work. So maybe so I can ask how to say Toy, can you, because you already have the presentation slides, maybe you can do this for me to save the time. 但是我动不了了，懂吗？你看我这个。
Everyone can just bear with us a moment. Let's see if the slides moving
这个可以了，
for
这个
Professor.
可以，我们试一下啊。看啊，这儿这不动，哦，可以了 ，OK。Okay, so thank you very much, Toy. So I don't know, I also, my student also helped me to solve this problem. Now,
That's no problem, Professor. Just tell me next slide, and then I'll go to next slide.
Okay, thank you very much, Toy. So now, it's really a great pleasure to be here to give a talk. So our brief introduction about the recent development of China's national emission trading system. So I think now the last year is a very important year for the development and the implementation of China's national emission trading program. So program so it was said now the program has been started by the end of 2017, but no running anymore. So but I think now this year, so now the program will start running. So I think it's exciting news. So the last year, a lot of work has been done so by the Chinese government. So now I would like to give an update. So for next slide, please. What's the most important things have been done so for the last year? Okay, so first I would like to see now the China's emission national ETS is a multi-sector emission trading program. So it covers the power generation sector and also the major energy intensive sectors. So if the program has a full run, so it will regulate approximately 72% of China's total energy-related CO2 emissions. So you can see, I think it's a very big. It will be, it's supposed to be the biggest the emission trading program in the world. Okay, next slide, please. So now this is I think the most important development or the important work has been done. So for the last year, the 2020. So in spite of so we are facing how to say the COVID-19, but I think all the people so in the ETS circle work very hard. So I think so. Now we can see the national emission trading program start running. So what we can see that I think some documents so can support the argument. So the first I think first is the directive on the capacity and the allowance allocation was released on December 30, 2020 by the Ministry of Ecology and the Environment. So and also according to these documents, so by the end of this month, so the allowance allocation will be completed. That means every company, the power energy companies covered by the program will receive so allowance, a permit. So also so now the allowance allocation so is for the year 19 and 20. So for the past 2 years, the compliance circle so will be end by the end of this year. So by the end of this year. So I think this is a very important development, and also I think so just at the end of the last year, and also another important documents So is the emission permit trading management also has been released by the Ministry of Ecology and Environment. So we have not state council. We have not a regulation of the state council or the central government. I think now, so that there is a document of the Ministry of Ecology. So it provides this document is from the Ministry of Ecology and Environment, and so it's just as how to say temporal. So getting documents for the whole management of the National Emission Trading Program. And also, I think for the last year, also the work has been keeping doing. So regarding the emission data reporting and verification, so it's covering not only the port and region sector, but also other 7 sectors covered by the emission trading program. So and also I think there are also substantial progress has been made. So in terms of the construction of the registration system and the trading system, the registration system. So now and also the trading system. So was how to say built in different place and organized by different organization. So there is a need of the integration. So of the two systems. So it takes a lot of how to say work. So the last year took a lot of last year. So there's a lot of integration work has been done, and also there are also regarding the design and so of the registration system and also the trading system. Also some new work has been done. Was done so last year, and also so I think it's also there are also progress so made so for the national ETS legislation. So we there are very positive, I would say, message has been got. So and that means it's very likely. So and there will be a very high level legislation. So that is from the state council. So and the legislation could be, let's say, could be passed, very likely passed so by the end of this year. And also I think that the leaders, so and very much how to say highlight or emphasize the importance the national emission trading program and the emission trading program. So I think it's so I think maybe I think so. You also know for the first how to say compliance cycle, the allowance is allocated free, so no how to say no auction and for the first compliance cycle, and also the allocation method is very much based is very much based on the benchmark. So so it's output based and the benchmark based allowance allocation, and so that means the China emission trading program. So largely is a rate-based system. So for the first compliance period, and so I think now I think this is the most important things I believe took place the last year. So I think maybe Professor Qi can add something, can add something to the work. But next slide, please. So now, so I think now, so now I think for the first compliance period is just for the port and region sector. I think the very soon, so the other sectors will be ready to be covered so by the emission trading program. So including I think the cement sector, and also the electronic aluminum sector. I think it will be very soon to be part of the emission trading program, and also by the end of the 15th five-year plan period, I think the other sectors could be covered by the emission trading program. Eventually, so the emission trading program will be a multi-sector emission trading program. Okay, so next slide, please. So now, so I think it's also very exciting news. So our President Xi Jinping announced China's new climate pledge, that is to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2060. So we also conduct some analysis about the goal. So you can see there is radical energy system transformation. So in the future, but for the and also generally speaking, that the transformation will take place will force in two stages. So before the year 2020, so the transformation is relatively gradual, but after the year 2030, so there will be a very fast transformation or radical transformation take place. So and also what we expect, so that the emission trading program should be make a large contribution to the transformation, and they also need that means if the national emission trading program can really contribute to the transformation process, so they also need they need a carbon price that is high enough. So that means, so this is also the foundation for the setting of the floor price of the emission trading program. The next slide, please. So now this is the the level of the carbon price enabling the energy system transformation to achieve the carbon neutrality goal. So so you can see so if the emission trading program can play a large role, so that means the programs the carbon price should be higher. So then this level. So and then so my private opinion is that, so this can largely serve as reference for setting the floor price of the emission trading program. That means, so we will see. So if I think so the carbon price of the emission trading program should be more than $7 for this year. So we will see. So if the level is high enough, and I think in the future, so particularly so by the end of the 14th five-year plan period, so now the emission the carbon price of the emission trading program should be more than $10. So I think it's such that the program can really can play a role. So in promoting the transformation. I mean, I think it is the floor price of the actual price so it can be much higher so than this. So I think now I would like to stop the talk here. So I'll be happy to answer any questions from you. Maybe after the talk of Professor Qi. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a really rich presentation. And I know I took a lot of notes there. And, just a few things that struck me and that I'm looking forward to hearing more about, just the allocation system, the program coverage and that expansion of the coverage of the program to include other sectors over time. Certainly a similar approach that was taken in California to move towards a more comprehensive economy-wide coverage of California's emissions trading program. So exciting to see that parallel here. Also noting the carbon neutrality goal set by President Xi. I noticed a significant projected reduction in your chart in coal use, and that's maybe something else we can discuss. And then obviously a steeply increasing carbon price over time, and you mentioned, you know, the idea of a floor price, and I know that's something that Professor Wong and I and others have talked about in some of our work in the past. So hopefully we can delve into some or all of those points in our discussion. Thank you again, Professor, for your remarks. I'd now like to turn to Professor Chi, and I'll just give a brief introduction. Professor Chi is a professor and director at the Climate Change and Energy Economics Study Center at Wuhan University, where his research focuses on low carbon economy and its policies. He has been a participant in the Initiative for US-China Dialogue on Global Issues, faculty research group on climate change, and served as the chief economist for a project called China's Carbon Emissions Trading System under Low Carbon Economic Transformation, excuse me, supported by the Education Ministry of China. And he will provide an overview of the provincial experience with Hebei's ETS program. So Professor, thank you so much and look forward to your remarks.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and good evening, everyone. It's my great pleasure to join this webinar in terms of the carbon market in China in the national level and provincial level. So my slides and the voice is okay?
Yes, we can see your slides and you're coming through loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to share with all of you in terms of the Hubei province ETS pilots during the past almost 10 years, which is about the development and the effectiveness of Hubei ETS pilot. Yes, just like Professor Zhang mentioned, now China launched formally its national carbon market. It's a very exciting news for us. But during the past 10 years, in the end of 2011, China started its ETS pilots in the 7 provinces and major cities. Hubei province is one of the ETS pilots. Up to now, it's almost 10 years for Hubei ETS pilots. We since 2011 and 2005, 2013, we did a lot of prepare in terms of the ETS pilots policy design and structure, design. First of all, in terms of the regulation system of Hubei ETS pilots, we construct these 5 aspects to regulation the Hubei ETS pilots. First is the thematic meeting of the provincial government to coordinate major issues of carbon market constructions. And second, we set up the climate office, the climate office in provincial DRC responsible for the ETS pilots, and the province leading group for climate change in charge of the overall coordination. The group leader is the president of the province. And the fourth is the panel of experts to provide technical support of the Hubei ETS pilots. I'm the leader of this panel of experts. And each year, Hubei province government provide 15 million RMB to support the construction of carbon market. And in terms of the coverage cap and allowance allocation in Hubei ETS pilots, first of all, in terms of the coverage, our threshold is the highest among the 7 ETS pilots, especially the first 3 years. Since 2014, 2016, our threshold of the ETS panels is equal or larger than 60,000 tons of standard of the CO2 emit of the coal standard. And since 2016, our covered sectors keep line with the national carbon market sectors. We changed to the national carbon market threshold that is equal or larger than 10,000 tons coal standard consumption. And the other sectors exclude outside the national carbon market covered still keep our threshold in the province. And next year, that is 2017, up to now, we changed totally from the provincial threshold to the national carbon market threshold. That is the 10,000 tons standard coal. And in terms of number of forms, since the first year, it is covered 1,038 major enterprises. And since then, every year we increase the numbers of forms covered by our ETS panels. And all the covered enterprises in the secondary industry sectors. And the numbers of industries or sectors, the first year is just the 12 sectors covered by our ETS. And now it's 16 sectors covered by our ETS. And in terms of cap, the total amount of our cap, the first year is the highest cap, which is 3.24 100 million tons CO2 emission, and then decrease year by year. And since 2019, it's just 2.7 million, 100 million tons. And the time structure, we divided the total cap into three parts. The first, almost 70% of the total cap is allocated to the enterprises covered by the ETS, which is the initial allowance allocated to the enterprises. And the other almost 20 or 30% of the total cap is the government reserved and the new entrant reserved. And in terms of the allocation methods, we try to test the grandfather or the historical method, benchmark, and historical industry. The first year, almost all the enterprise and sectors used the grandfather method. Just the electricity sector, half of the electricity sector we use the benchmark, and the other half of the electricity allowance allocation still use the historical method. And since the second year of our panels, we add the cement, electricity, heat and power co-generation user benchmarking method, and all the other 12 sectors still keep their grandfather. And then we increase the benchmark and especially the historical intensity since 2016 to other sectors, for example, the glass, mix, and heat power coordination paper to try to use the historical intensity. So the three major allocation allowance method we test in different years in different sectors, which provide richful experiences for our national carbon market. And the allowance adjustment, because almost all the allowance is free. So the free allowance expired and canceled each year, and very special in our ETS palette is the following two aspects. The first is that we try to test the cap at double 20. That means because we are the pellets, so every year when the enterprises they compliance, we just ask them to compliance within 20% of their emission based on their allowance they get from the government. That means if their actual emission, CO2 emission is beyond or over is more than the allowance they are allocated by the government freely, within 200,000 tons or 20%, they have to pay, and more than this double, they can get additional allowance freely. So we, based on this policy design, we control the cost, carbon cost of our forms covered by the ETS. And the second very special policy design is that market regulation factors. That means every end of the year, when we allocated the next year's allowance, we try to balance the total demand and the total supply of the carbon market. We don't want the oversupply of the last year's allowance still in the market, which may be give a shock on the carbon market supply and the carbon price. Every year we try to balance the total supply and demand allowance in the carbon market. And we also considered merge and divided or shut down or move out our province in terms of the enterprises covered by our ETS pillars. In terms of trading mechanism, our traded product is two products. The major is carbon emission allowance, and the other, a small part, can treat it either CCER, that is Chinese CER. And trade time is 9:30 to 11:30 in the morning, and 13 to 15 in the afternoon work days in Beijing time. And the trade model, the two trade model, negotiation and bargaining. The other is transfer pricing. This is the explanation about the negotiation and bargaining and the transfer pricing, the two major trade model. The price quotation unit is the tick size is 0.1 RMB per ton. And the traders, we try to reach for and diversified our investors in our market, include covered forms, institutional investors, individual investors, and foreign investors. All of these different investors we welcome. And the entry cost is very, very low. We try to absorb more investors to join our carbon market. So the annual fee, the membership fee, and account opening fee, free. All of these free. And the transaction fees, we try to discount and give a preferential transaction fees. In terms of MRV regulation system, the provincial government, published the greenhouse gas MRV guidance for industry enterprises in Hubei province, and the greenhouse gas verification guidance in Hubei province. And the following is the verification process. Very special is that we, after the third independent verification institution verified mutual spot check and reporting, the government entrusted the fourth part to further check the verification report by the third part. So my university, my team almost often, play the role of the fourth part. And in terms of the increasing coverage, participants, there are 364 enterprises, 273 institutional investors, and 9,164 individual investors in our market. Especially the individual investors play a very important role in our market in terms of the trading volume and liquidity. So that's why the Hubei ETF patterns, in terms of its trading volume and trading value, keep the top one among the 7 ETF patterns. The coverage, the top 5 industries by number of ETS forms, the chemical sector include 9 enterprises, and the 70th sector include 46. Food and beverage sector include 30 forms, and building materials 39, and steel 23. In terms of the top 4 industry emission, carbon emission, the steel sector is 21% of the total carbon market, and the chemical is 12%, electricity 27%, and cement 21%. Just these 4 industry totally, in terms of its CO2 emission, is more than 8% of our total market. And the proportion of the ETS forms in Hubei province, in terms of its proportion in total emission, that means Hubei ETS patterns covered 45% of the whole province CO2 emission. And the covered sector and profits in terms of its total output value is 30% of the whole province. And the proportion in output value of secondary industry, our carbon market covered 70%. The transaction price and volume just in the end of 20 years, just like this, the highest price is 54, almost 54 RMB per tin. And the transaction volume, the highest happened here. Well, it's very interesting that almost every highest trade volume happened in August, and recent years in the end of the year, December. Why? Because this is a compliance month. So it's very interesting. Usually the trade volume is very stable. Just during the compliance months, the trade volume increased sharply. And in terms of market-oriented emission reduction in terms, we think that the ETS patterns provide a very effective emission reduction incentives, because some ETS forms covered by our ETS, they can sell their allowance to get money. Just the first 60 years, the 6 years, the total revenue from the carbon market by the firms covered by ETS is 390 million yuan. They sold 17.73 million tons of their allowance. And the other forms covered by our ETS panels, their allowance is shortage. They have to purchase, that is 25.54 million tons they have to purchase, and they cost 580 million US during their first 6 years. And the significant effective of our emission reduction because of the ETS panels. And it's very interesting that the different allowance allocation method, their effective of the emission reduction is different. Because the first 3 years, we mainly based on the grandfather method. So, the first year, 129 forms used the grandfather. Among them, more than half percentage of them, they decrease in carbon emission and carbon intensity, and 44.2% increase in carbon emission or carbon intensity. And the second year and the third year of our ETS panels, the decrease in carbon emission and carbon intensity increased very, obviously, from 55 to 73. Yeah, and since 2017, we try to use intensity method in glass, in electricity, heat, and so on. So we can compare the grandfather and intensity method that shows the intensity method is better than the grandfather, because more than 70% of the firms use the intensity method, decrease in carbon emission and carbon intensity. That's why Professor Zhang Jilang, when they designed the national carbon market, they try to use the intensity method because it is better in terms of the emission reduction based on our ETS panels experiences. And in terms of, during the past 6 years, our numbers of the firms covered by our ETS increase, but the cap of our ETS panels decrease. So proportion of the suppliers companies decrease, but the proportion of shortage allowance of the companies increase, especially recent 3 years. The shortage of the companies covered by our ETS keep more than 60%. That means the numbers increase, the form number increase, but the cap, tighter and tighter. So, but the economic effective economic enforcement, the achievement is better. In terms of the secondary industry added value, Hubei province much better than a whole national average level. So that means the tightening allowance, the better economic growth we achieved in Hubei province. That give a very significant experience that we can get the better climate and better economic growth if we adopt a very effective climate policies. So that's why the China decide make its decision to set up the national carbon market because of the ETS patterns should give a very significant evidence that the market-oriented climate change, that is ETIs, can help us to get better climate and better economic growth. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor. There's a lot in there, and I know there have been some great questions coming in from the audience during the course of the presentations, and some of these are being answered directly through the Q&A chat, but I also will plan to pull some of those into our conversation as well once we get into the discussion. But before we do that, I wanted to turn to our discussants, and I wanted to introduce our first discussant, Dallas Burtraw, somebody that whose work I have really appreciated and respected in my career, and that has been an incredibly important person in supporting the development of emissions trading programs and our understanding of them here in the US. Dr. Burtraw is an economist and a Darius Gaskin Senior Fellow at the Resources for the Future. And as I mentioned, has provided extensive technical support in the design of emissions trading programs in the Northeast states under the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in California, and in the EU, and he also serves as the chair of California's Independent Emissions Market Advisory Committee. You know, I have been a big fan of and interested in Dallas's work on linkage by degrees, and I'm hoping that maybe we can get into a little bit of conversation about that. But before we do, Dr. Burtraw, I just wanted to ask you a question to maybe help frame out your remarks. You know, we often think about carbon pricing, or it's often discussed as the most efficient, cost-effective approach to achieving emission reductions. And there are obviously a number of different forms of carbon pricing, including, you know, what we have in California and what we're seeing emerging in China. So what, in your view, are the most important features in implementing carbon pricing successfully, and do you have any initial impressions based on that and what we've just heard from Professor Zhang and Professor Qi?
Well, thank you very much, Amy. Thank you to the California China Climate Institute for inviting me to be here. I am so impressed by these two presentations and the information we learned and the progress. There's so much that we can learn from each other in terms of the way that China has progressed and is thinking about these issues, and the way California has. This is the beginning of a beautiful relationship, I hope. The question you pose, Amy, about the elements of a carbon market and how it can evolve over time is at the heart of what I consider linking by degrees. I want to start by, I'm an economist. Many of the people, or the participants here today, are economists, and so in some ways we dedicated our careers to advancing the approach of using economic methods and carbon pricing because we think it's the most efficient way to achieve emission reductions. And that's so important because we have to achieve so many emission reductions that it's very important for our economies that we do so efficiently, that we achieve these emission reductions efficiently in order to save costs and to improve welfare. So there's no question, I think, among those of us on this, that we are all advocates of carbon pricing. But now I will offer my own view about how to think about this in a bigger picture. To imagine a carbon pricing as a one-size-fits-all policy solution, I believe, is not practical. And it's a misguided or counterproductive strategy to advocate for this as a single or ideal outcome. And I know that in China, as in California, there are many other policies, industrial policies, regulatory policies throughout the economy and at the provincial and local level that have the influence of helping, hopefully helping to reduce and certainly affecting the greenhouse gas emissions that we observe. And in California, we've implemented a portfolio of policies to work to achieve emission reduction goals. And carbon pricing is one valuable element of that portfolio, but it doesn't constitute the whole portfolio, of course. And climate policy success also requires coordination and collaboration among jurisdictions, California and China and others. And this involves an alignment of ambition and institutions and regulations that are part of the climate policy portfolio. And so this moves to the concept of linking of carbon markets that you asked about, Aimee. Linking carbon markets is often discussed as though there was actually a transfer of a compliance instrument, a tradable allowance or something between these markets. And that might be something that is a powerful end result that we achieve one day, but is more useful to focus on the preconditions that might one day allow linking. And in taking steps to potentially enable linking, a lot can be accomplished even before linking of markets might be realized. And these steps involve aligning of administrative rules, the aligning of measurement and enforcement, not necessarily the way it's done, but a comparable level of stringency and rigor. Complementary sector-specific policies, compliance periods, and then ultimately stringency, aligning the stringency across jurisdictions. And we think of this as linking by degrees, learning from each other, learning what has worked in the other jurisdiction, and borrowing those ideas and taking them home with you, and then handing off what's worked back to the other partners. As French, one of my favorite quotes of the recent climate policy history is one by French Ambassador Laurence Tubiana. She articulated in the period leading up to the Paris Accord, to paraphrase her, it has become less important to articulate further where we want to end, and more important to articulate the path we can take to get there. And linking by degrees implies a series of steps on that path. So I've noted that California has climate policy goals that build carbon pricing into a larger portfolio of policies, and this portfolio involves what I call companion policies aimed at improving air quality, stimulating innovation, addressing distributional goals, and other goals. There's other policies that relate very much to how we can achieve greenhouse gas emission reductions. And this policy portfolio and all these related issues is crucial to building constituencies that become winners in a clean energy economy. These constituencies become advocates for stronger policies over time, including, I hope, an expanded role for carbon pricing over time. So a cornerstone to enabling all this to occur is carbon market design, which we've been hearing about tonight. And this is terrific. And the one take-home lesson that I want to put on the table for discussion is that it's crucial that the carbon market does not create a waterbed effect. That is where when regulations are successful, they should lead to additional emission reductions and not simply to a reduction in the allowance price in the carbon market. If there was only a carbon cap and no guidance on what the price in the market should be, then these additional policies that take all sorts of shapes and forms, when they become effective, when a local government becomes effective at helping to drive down emissions, it just would lead to a depressing the allowance price in the carbon market and wouldn't constitute real additional emission reductions unless there's some administrative mechanism or automatic mechanism that increases the stringency of the carbon cap to account for the success of these complementary policies. And in California, a crucial feature that helps to achieve this outcome is the price floor. So I think we'll want to talk about that. And I want to emphasize one important thing that we've pioneered in California. Well, actually, it goes all the way back to the SO2 trading program, but this price floor can be implemented with free allocation. This is done in California with respect to allowances that are conditionally allocated to the electric utilities, who are required to consign or submit these allowances to the auction for sale. And then the revenue from that sale goes back to the electric utilities. So in this way, the auction can impose a minimum price, and you can still have free allocation to all the compliance entities. But the price floor ensures that that other successful regulatory policies does not drive down the price in the emissions market, but actually accelerates the emission reductions that are achieved, and thereby helps the carbon market to achieve its goals. So I'll summarize, Aimee, by saying that I think carbon pricing is essential. I could not celebrate more. I can't find the words to celebrate my enthusiasm for the success in this regard and what I've heard tonight about progress in China. But I never think that carbon pricing is sufficient. I think that companion policies play a very important role in achieving emission reductions in the short run and enabling the expansion of carbon pricing over time. For a full portfolio of policies involving both sector policies and carbon pricing to be successful, the carbon market must be designed to maximize the contribution from the companion policies, for example, through the introduction of a price floor or through careful administrative oversight. And I want to ask, after when we get around to discussion section, I would like to ask how that might be implemented in China. Thank you very much, and congratulations on the tremendous contributions you have made.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Bertroff, for that. And we'll turn now to Dr. Wang and hear his remarks, and then maybe we can circle back to your question, Dallas, to kick us off in our discussion. And as I said, there are some great questions coming through from the audience as well. So just a reminder, if you have one, please do drop it in the Q&A. I know our panelists are typing responses to some of those questions, but I'd also like to bring some of them into the conversation so we can all hear them. But before we do that, our last discussant, but certainly not least, is Professor Alex Wong, a close partner of us at the California China Climate Institute and a professor of law at UCLA. As well as a leading expert on environmental governance and the law and politics in China around climate change. His research focuses on the social effects of law and the interaction of law on institutions in China and the United States. He was previously a senior attorney at one of the most well-known environmental NGOs in the United States, the Natural Resources Defense Council. He was based in Beijing and a senior founding member, of NRDC's China Environmental Law and Governance Project. And he is also, we are very fortunate, a member of our Institute's Academic Advisory Committee. So Professor Wong, thank you so much for being with us this morning or this evening. You obviously have an incredible depth of experience with environmental governance in both the US and China. And so I'm curious if you can help us kind of tie the threads of this discussion together and identify some of the opportunities and challenges you see based on all of that knowledge for China's emissions trading system.
Great. Thanks so much, Aimee, and thanks for having me here tonight. I want to take the opportunity to say I really appreciate joining this conversation. And I also want to congratulate Drs. Zhang and Qi on all the work that they've done. I know they've been working incredibly hard on a system that has incredibly high stakes, for both China and the entire world. And I also want to commend them in particular for the amount of engagement they've done with the international community, not only in events like this, but also in long-term sustained academic research, co-authoring articles, these types of things. These things have all helped us to understand what China is doing and helped us all to learn and to move forward in this effort to decarbonize. I also want to note that the context in which we're discussing this is China's 2060 carbon neutrality goal, which everyone knows about, and we should just mark that how essential that has been to change in the nature of the discussion about climate change policy in the last 6 months. It's pushed a lot of countries to focus on carbon neutrality. It's oriented our discussions much more towards more specific problem solving and decarbonization pathways. There's been a flurry of research setting forth different ways to achieve these targets, which has been very important. And it's also raised questions about how we achieve these pathways in practice, given political barriers, economic barriers, and the limits of our institutions and governance. So being a lawyer, I naturally would focus on that last issue, on the issues of governance and institutions. And I want to focus my remarks on three particular areas, sort of the impact of politics on our ability to use pricing as an effective environmental measure. Two, the need to think about transparency and integrity of the trading system. And third, to just to flag environmental justice issues, which have become a hot button issue in the US and will deserve debate in China as well. So on the first point on politics, in the US and around the world, there's been a long debate about the relative efficacy of market versus command and control and other types of regulations. There's maybe the strongest form critique of the carbon trading measures, which you all know well, is that the critique goes is that sort of trading is good in theory, but in practice, because of political limitations and these sorts of things, it's often difficult to set up the system in a way that has the kind of environmental ambition that we need. And so we naturally see these sorts of pressures on these systems, and it's worth, I think, just flagging that we should spend some time to focus on those and to talk about the limits of trading vis-a-vis other measures. I thought Dallas's comments were very sensible, thinking about these measures as part of a suite and thinking about the relative power of these different measures. But I agree with Dallas that I think all of these measures are important tools in the toolkit. So I know that China's system will face similar types of political economy challenges, just like these systems do elsewhere in the world. And just to flag a few, I would love to just hear some thoughts on how to grapple with these issues in the Chinese system. So, one feature that Dr. Zhang mentioned is, of course, the basic feature of the system as a tradable performance standard and what that means for environmental efficacy. Right. Of course, this is a system that encourages greater carbon efficiency, but does not set a cap on overall emissions. And the economists' studies show that it creates a sort of implicit subsidy for output. Right, you get more credits the more you produce, and it may encourage the more efficient plants to produce more output and more emissions above business as usual levels. And there are reasons for this. Right, China is a very fast-growing economy. You would have to adjust the cap. There could be very serious economic implications if you don't set the cap right. So an intensity measure makes sense in light of those needs. But it's worth just being transparent about these trade-offs and to discuss how do we maximize the environmental efficacy in light of that. The other feature is the sort of tiered benchmarks element that Dr. Zhang mentioned. And that is also one that obviously has it serves some distributional goals, right? It serves to create slightly lower performance standards for certain classes of technologies that reduces some of the pressure on those technologies, but it also has an impact on environmental efficacy. If our primary goal is reducing emissions, what is the impact and what is the balance there? And those are discussions that are worth having. And of course, these types of trade-offs and concessions to different constituencies are parts of all regulatory systems. We've seen this in California with, for example, as part of the bargain to extend cap and trade, local regulators being prohibited from directly regulating greenhouse gas emissions at facilities covered under the state cap and trade program. So there again, it's worth just being clear about these types of trade-offs that are being made. And so in the end, I guess my view on the role of carbon pricing is very similar to Dallas's. It's something that will play a role in a suite of regulatory instruments that include command and control regulation, information regulation, industrial policy, sort of public involvement, law, and these sorts of things. we should also be clear about exactly what are the functions we would expect the markets to perform, right? One thing we haven't discussed much tonight is the revenue raising function of markets. If you auction allowances and generate funds, how do you use those funds? Like California has a fund where it channels these funds towards greenhouse gas emission reduction efforts with a focus on low-income communities, disadvantaged communities, public health, and these sorts of things. In China, I know, having worked with lots of researchers, there are lots of researchers who are interested in introducing more market measures into the system. And this market system can have a very powerful effect in showing the worth of market pricing in a system that has traditionally relied much more heavily on administrative measures, right? So there's a very powerful sort of contextual benefit of markets in the Chinese context. But then ultimately, I think our focus has to be on, especially given China's very ambitious 2060 target, what is the role of carbon pricing in deeply reducing emissions from these different sectors? And we have to be very clear about the impact of pricing versus the other types of measures that China is using a whole suite of measures, from industrial policy to efficiency standards to really the whole gamut of regulatory instruments. The second point on transparency and integrity, I just note the issue just for discussion, really, because I note I've had a chance to review China's new rules on carbon trading that were just released by the ministry. And that goal is very much part of those rules, right? They say that the carbon trading system should be run on the principles of honesty and trustworthiness and fairness and openness. And there are a host of provisions that are designed to enforce against misfeasance by the government bureaucrats, and also to prevent firms from cheating on data and these sorts of things. And so a well-functioning ETS obviously depends on robust data. Much of the data in the system will be self-reported by the firms. And so how do we ensure that that data is accurate and reliable? The current rules in China rely on transparency and public participation. I've worked on this issue quite a lot in the Chinese context and know that over the last decade or so, there's been a big push to use those tools in the environmental context. And so we should have a discussion about how we can use that to really guarantee the integrity of the Chinese trading system. And then finally, again, just to flag the environmental justice issue, and I use this term in a broad sense, both in the kind of classic environmental justice concerns about disparate impact on disadvantaged groups and communities, but also to bring in the issue of just transition, right? If we are going to use pricing to sort of reduce emissions from certain sectors, what is, how can we mitigate the negative economic impact on the workers in those industries and the communities there? And to the extent that we handle the justice issues and the just transition issues, does it allow us more space to be more aggressive on the environmental mitigation aspects of carbon pricing? Okay, so I will end there. I've really appreciated this conversation, and thank you to Drs. Zhang and Qi, and to Dallas for your comments. This has been really a great learning experience, and I look forward to the discussion with all of you and to working with you down the road.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Wong. And I agree, there's a really rich set of topics here for discussion. And we've got about 20 minutes left. So never as much time as we'd like, but still, I think ample time to dive into these. Just from the top of my head, I think based on our conversation, we've learned a lot from the presentations and the responses on design principles, both the design of the national and the Hebei program. And Alex, you just spoke about integrity. Obviously, ensuring environmental integrity is critical. So I think maybe there's a thread of conversation there. Complementary policies, obviously a big piece of Dallas of your presentation. And I think I'm really interested to hear more about how cap and trade will be complemented by, and interacting with other policies in China's rich climate and in clean air policy landscape. The long-term targets, obviously, we couldn't be having this conversation and ignore the 2060 commitment that I think has been really welcomed wholeheartedly by the international community from President Xi. And I think, as Alex noted, there's a just transition aspect of that as we look ahead in the longer term, acknowledging the need to move away from fossil fuels and what that looks like. And then, of course, you know, in our US context, local politics, national politics have a huge influence on all of this. Obviously, we are looking to a Biden administration that's made very significant commitments on climate as part of his campaign platform. And so there's a lot that remains to be seen there, but I think a lot of opportunity again for rich discussion about sort of how the relationship between the US and China evolves in this particular policy area as President-elect Biden brings the US back into international climate agreement and back into alignment with science and what's required to tackle the challenge. So with that, Dallas, I know you had a question teed up and kicking, so maybe I will hand it over to you, and then we can just sort of discuss organically, and I'll bring in some Q&A from the audience as we go. So again, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to tee it up in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we will bring it in. Dallas, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Alex, for your remarks also. I thought they were great. And so, Professor Xi and Professor Zhang, the question that I would articulate is, what about this interaction between the emerging market with a carbon price and the many other regulations that affect those same sources and encourage those sources to make investments and to innovate and to reduce their emissions? Will there be a natural adjustment to try to capture the benefits and the synergy between these two regulatory approaches, a price and other regulations? How is that being thought about?
Professor Zhang, would you be
Okay.
answer?
Okay. So I think it's a fantastic question. So I think it's I mean the collaboration and the linkage between the pricing programs that can really, let's say, and help the world to achieve the climate targets. So I think and right now, so I think now for the moment, so I think it's very important to learn each other. So for example, so we learn a lot from the California exercise. So we benefit a lot from through the collaboration from the California practice. Of course, we also learn a lot from the EU. So I think I think it's very important. So the collaboration and the learning from other jurisdictions. So at least so regarding the ETS program. So so I think that just not for China. So I think right now, so this year I can see the National Emission Treaty Program. So so in my how to say, my interpretation is that now for this year the program is still in a stage of starting operation. It's not a full operation. I think the full operation will take place next year, but this year is starting operation. So now the government, the National Development Reform Mission announced the launch of the program in the year in the year 2017, but there is not a real one. So it takes still 3 years for the preparation. So I think this year, so it's starting run. So we will see. So we will also test the design. So if to test the design. So I think a lot of work. So we need to do to summarize and to improve. So to make it the operation better. So I think, of course, I think starting, so it's very important, it's critical. So, but in the future, we still have time to improve it. So I think this is the basic story. And also, I think, so in Asia, so China has already emission trading program. South Korea has an emission trading program, but that's not a big program. So in Japan, so maybe in this context, I think maybe the US and China and also the EU. So how to encourage Japan start so the national emission trading program. So I think it's maybe is interesting. And also I think in China, so in our program development, we also pay attention to to the how to say what will be happened. So particularly the how to say the clean energy issues in the Belt and the Road Initiative nations. So I think it's a very important new elements for design. So we would like to. I think it's very important to help. So those nations, so under the BRI, to thinking, so introducing the carbon markets. So after 3 years of operation, maybe China can have a say to tell them, okay, no, this is the China's how to say successful stories and unsuccessful stories. I think how to start, how to say how to address the political, the institutional barriers, and how to achieve a general consensus. So among different stakeholders. So I can see it's really hard to get a general consensus to make an agreement. So on really building a national emission trading program. And also, so Alex mentioned, China's the emission trading program is really is largely in nature is a tradable performance standards. It's a rate-based system. So at this moment, so at this stage, so maybe in the future, so I think it could be transformed to a mass-based system, and dollars. So also I think the remarks is very valuable. It's very interesting. It's very helpful for us. So we are also actually, so for the past year, we also take a lot of efforts to study the feasibility of introducing the the consignment auction to as a tools to introduce the the floor price. So so our team now is in the final stage of formulation of a proposal. So for the Department of Ecology and Environment. So we hope maybe next year we can introduce the consignment auction. So as a tool to introduce the the floor price. So anyway, I think there's a lot of things we have already learned from the California and the story. So and of course we also I know, so we also get direct assistance and help from the experts like Dallas and Alex and many others from California to make the China's emission trading program eventually start running. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor. And I think, Alex, you had a question. I just wanted to quickly draw some of the questions in from the audience, and I'm just going to kind of summarize a couple of them, and then maybe, Alex, you can ask your question, and then we can have a bit of discussion. So there are a couple of just broad questions about the operation of the national ETS in China. There was one question noting that, as you said, Professor Zhang, there's the program will be operational this year, but curiosity about when active trading will start for the power sector. So that's one question. And there was another question about offset credits. So offset credits are permitted in under California's program, and a question whether offsets will be allowed under China's national emissions trading program. And then just one other question I'll pull in. There was a question about if it's possible to sort of even maybe broadly say how much of the emission reductions towards the goal will be driven by the carbon market versus government set standards and mandates. So I'll throw those questions out there, and then Alex, hand it over to you for a question and more discussion.
Yeah, Dr. Zhang, Dr. Chi, since we have this opportunity to have you here, I wanted to ask some just your thoughts on specific design choices that might increase environmental ambition with carbon pricing, and get your thoughts. So you already mentioned one, which is shifting to mass-based, a real cap. And I would love to hear your thoughts on, how likely is that in the near term? This is all, because my mind is focused on the 2060 target and what you said about sort of the progression to 2030 and then deeper decarbonization. I know there's going to be a lot of pressure on you guys to move that up faster, right? So if you're thinking about how to make that more ambitious, what are the things you would do? Like, would you shift to a mass-based system? Other possibilities are like eliminating the benchmarks, right? And then also making the benchmarks for even the efficient coal plants, sort of make the performance standard one that's maybe more akin to like a gas plant, so that it would really disfavor the coal plants, for example, right? You could go in that direction, but obviously there'd be impacts on the coal plants. These types of things, I would wonder if you had your choice to really ramp up environmental ambition, which are the design elements you would go to first?
So, okay, so I will try to answer the questions, and Professor Qin, you can correct me if it's you can correct me, and also you can add the information to the questions, of course. So I think the first, so it's about so I mean, when maybe the people very curious about when the trading take place. So I think anyway it will take place at this year. So because of because of the compliance cycle, so will be complete at the end of this year. So there will be give opportunity for those companies with a very high mitigation cost to buy loans. So to honor the commitment, to honor the commitment, to honor how to say for compliance. So and I think the progress is very much, the time is very much depends on when the construction of the full system be ready, be complete. So my personal estimation is about the mid of this year. So and the mid of this year, I think the full system will be, the construction of full system will be completed. So and then where the trading could be take place. So in the since the mid of this year. So this is my personal estimation. So another arguments, other question is about how to say what's the contribution of the national emission trading program. So in terms of the reduction of the China's total CO2 emission. So I think it's a hard question. That's why I emphasize that. So now this year, so it's starting operation. So but I think the role of the emission trading program could be increased. So year by year. So and by, for example, by increasing the stringency of the benchmarks, and so I think I also fully agree with Dallas' comments. So and opinion is about so that the ETS is only one element, the one instruments of the climate policy portfolio in China. But I think is very the role. But I think the role is increasing. So in the future, this is my so my personal estimation. So I think in the future, because the National Emission Trading Program will regulate approximately over 70% of China's total emission. I think the role should be large. So and but it's very hard to know what's the exactly contribution from ETS. So it's neither another, of course, study. For example, according to a recent study of the Beijing emission pilot program. So I think the contribution is about between 12% to 20% is by sectors. Is varying by sectors. But I think that the future, I think the China, the emission trading program should play a large contribution. And also, I think now it looks like the emission trading program could become a primary, a major policy. So for the energy intensive sectors. So that means the power generation sector and also the energy intensive emission intensive sectors, industry sectors. But for the transportation, for the building sector, so other policies should be in place in the future. For example, maybe there will be a carbon tax be introduced in the future. I think introducing the carbon tax, the big issue is that big problem is what's the level of the carbon tax. But right now, so we have a emission trading program at least, so that the carbon price of the emission trading program can be served as a reference for setting the level of the carbon tax. And also last, the question is about the cap, so the issue. So I think not even, so the China's emission trading program is a tradable performance standard, but we also have a cap. So because we based on the benchmark and also the projection of the output, so then we also have a cap. So actually, so we really have a cap. So for the design of the emission trading program, the cap is flexible, but we can to some extent, but largely, so we also have a cap, and we also, let's say, the linking the stringency of the benchmark to national mitigation targets. So and this is also a way so make the emission trading program can really contribute to achieving the national mitigation targets. So this is my response. Maybe Professor Qi, you can correct me.
Okay, thank you very much for all of your very excellent comments and questions. And Professor Zhang answered almost all the questions because he's our chief, economics in terms of the national carbon market policy design. He contributes a lot of and understand the national carbon market policy design. Personally, based on the ETS panels during the past almost 10 years, I think I totally agree. Professor Dallas, he enforces the policy portfolio. Yes, I'm also the economics professor, and totally agree his point of view in terms of the policy portfolio, especially in China, because China is very, include 31 province, and the different province have a different economic development stage and different economic structure, energy structure, and so on. So the carbon market, just this one climate policy is not enough. We really need the policy portfolio, especially now the 2030 target and the carbon neutral target. We really need the policy portfolio. For example, now we start the national carbon market and covered only the electricity power sectors. But the power sector is also need reform because it's now a very, characteristics of monopoly by some very big companies. and it's and the electricity price is not market oriented. Also now we try to select some cities to do some reform pilots in terms of the power market and try to free its power price and decided by the market. But the whole system and the whole electricity market is still controlled by the based on their command and control policies, not the market-oriented policies. How to coordinate the command and order policy market of the electricity and the carbon market. It's a very big issue that we must deal with and try to reform the electricity marketization. And also how to intensive the renewable energy development is also need the other policy to support. For example, the renewable electricity produce mainly focus on the west, north, and east, north of China, but the demand mainly from the east major cities and advanced provinces in the east part of China. So transfer the renewable electricity from the east and north part of China to the east part of China have to, through many different provinces and regions, and how to, reform the benefit between different regions in terms of the electricity produce, transfer, and demand. It's also need the other policy reform to support. And in terms of the carbon market itself, I think the carbon price is very, very important. If the price is too low, it's not enough to support and incentive the companies to do some low carbon technology innovation and to do a lot of low carbon investment, especially after COVID-19. The different almost every local government, they have a very heavy pressure to recover their economic development. For example, in this year, Wuhan, the capital city of Hubei province, and it's shocked by the COVID-19 in the in the first month, 2 months of last year. And in the first season of the last year, its economic GDP growth rate is negative 40.5% in the first season of the last year because of the COVID-19 shock. So after a very, do a lot of effort in the second and fourth and third season of the last year, in the end of 2020, the GDP growth come back positive growth, but it's still very low. So the local government must firstly try to push the economic growth. This is their first, task. In this year, Wuhan city, their GDP growth rate target is make sure to keep 10% and try to challenge 12% growth rate. So that means there are a lot of investment projects must finish, and during this period, the economic development is especially economic recovery and the emission reduction may be conflict. So we need a lot of policy portfolio and try to balance the different policy portfolio and justice and the carbon market and the emission reduction and economic growth, especially after the COVID-19 economic recovery and employment. So I totally agree. Yeah,
Thank
the
you
policy.
so much, Professor.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interject, but we're running a little over time, and I know we have panelists who have other meetings that they need to jump to. This has been such a rich discussion. I'm sure we could all keep talking. And power market reform and incentivizing renewable energy investment, along with economic recovery, sound like 3 great topics for follow-on webinars. So thank you, Professor Chi, for teeing those up and sharing your wisdom with us. But I want to just close by thanking all of our panelists. This has been a really rich and fascinating discussion. I'm so grateful for everybody joining across time zones and for our attendees for sticking it out as we go a little bit over time. So thank you all on behalf of the California China Climate Institute. Thank you for joining us. This webinar will be available by video on our website, and we hope you'll join us in the future for other events. So thank you all.
Thank you, Aimee. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Next
Have a
Take care.
good night.
Thank you.
Good night.